Thank you very much for joining us here today for the interview with the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, Ren. SDG 17 is about partnerships, and it's very important for the UN to look at how to actually operate those partnerships. Where do you see the importance of SDG 17 for the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock?
The Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock is committed to mobilizing multi-stakeholder participants or participation in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, also because of its nature of multi-stakeholder, emphasizing no one be left behind. With that common commitment and vision, it is really very much an aligned commitment and approach towards this achieving the sustainable development. As a partner of the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, the International Dairy Federation worked with FAO and to launch what we call Rotterdam Declaration, announcing a commitment of the dairy sector towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And that federation represents 75% of the world milk production. As you can see, this is a very large-scale engagement of a particular sector, illustrating the commitment and the role of the global agenda in mobilizing the livestock sector for the SDGs.
In the new environment, it's very important to operate with multi-stakeholder approaches, especially in livestock, where there are players with almost opposing interests. Where do you see the importance for FAO to operate with multi-stakeholder approaches, especially in livestock?
Partnership is built in everyday's work of FAO. In setting standards, we work with experts from research organizations, academia, industries. In providing technical and policy support to governments, we also engage experts from different sectors. In the livestock sector in particular, we work with producer organizations, we work with governments, and through partnerships. So it is actually FAO's one of our primary functions is to promote and coordinate partnerships. One of the main work that FAO carry out is on what we call normative work, or develop international standards and guidelines for different sectors and also on particular issues. For instance, recently we launched voluntary guidelines for sustainable soil management. And also another example would be the development of international food safety guidelines, okay? And animal source protein is one of the areas where these food safety guidelines would apply. Now, in developing these international standards and guidelines, it is fundamental that these guidelines and the standards are based on science and evidence. And FAO really needs to mobilize scientific expertise from around the world.
Why is it important to focus on scientific evidence? It might be obvious for all those people that have gone through a scientific education, and it might be even intuitive, but it might not be as clear for the farmers.
Okay, one of the functions that FAO does, let's say very typically in the livestock sector, is to promote best practices. How can we know this is best practice? This is not only based on the empirical, let's say, practices of farmers, but also based on trials and errors and evidence. This is shown to be the best practice. Let's say the most efficient use of natural resources, okay? And also practices that can reduce, let's say, greenhouse gas emissions. How do you know this is a practice that can help or contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions? This has been through scientific experiments and tests, okay, and proven to be efficient. And there are numerous examples to illustrate, right? In terms of, let's say, the quantity, the liters of milk that you can produce out of 1 kilo of feed, for instance, that efficiency needs to be calculated and tested. Okay, such a task, okay, let's say monitoring or managing a disease in a region or globally, for instance, the avian influenza now affecting many countries, right? It cannot be done by one institute or one organization. It requires coordinated work of governments and institutions, extension agencies and industries, and the farmers themselves, all together.
At the last COAG, you emphasized that the global agenda is a multi-stakeholder partnership and not a regular project. How are you actually supporting that uniqueness in terms of the operations within FAO?
FAO's role in, let's say, convening platforms such as the Global Agenda for Sustainable Livestock, and also FAO's role as a stakeholder of such platforms. So there's a kind of a dual role here. First of all, as the Committee on Agriculture of FAO, the COAG, emphasized and also encouraged FAO to facilitate, to convene this platform. And in that sense, we say that the global agenda is not owned by FAO. It is owned by the multi-stakeholders, by the partners, okay? And FAO facilitates, we hosts, we offers the secretariat that supports the operations of the global agenda.
Sometimes it seems, though, that those two different roles don't really trickle down within the operations side of FAO to actually accommodate for the fact that a multi-stakeholder partnership has a different identity.
During the discussions with our member countries, such as at the COAG, questions also arose that member country representatives don't see the convergence of these two roles of being a facilitator and also host, or let's say the secretariat, for the global agenda for sustainable livestock, whereas also you are a player, you are part of it. Okay, they don't see the linkage of this. Okay, but let me just explain that. The global agenda, when it functions, it needs a secretariat. It goes without saying. And who is that secretariat? And it has been recognized and agreed by the members that FAO is well positioned to play that role. It is sometimes confusing to say that FAO claim yourself to provide a secretariat to the agenda, but in the meantime you are a stakeholder. Do people see a conflict of interest there? It should not. In our view, there's no conflict of interest. It's just convergence of roles.
What is the most critical issue that the global agenda needs to tackle right now?
There's still a continued need to, let's say, mobilize government policymakers to recognize the role of agriculture, including livestock, in achieving sustainable development goals. Also in achieving the global climate change agenda. Okay. And it is not universally recognized, or let's say there has been no universal commitment yet from all member countries to the, let's say, the central role of agriculture and livestock in achieving the SDGs. And that's one of the challenges and the tasks that the global agenda needs to continue to tackle. So that's number one challenge. The second, I think, is that the global agenda needs to move from purely dialogue to some of the actions, okay, in promoting let's say, certain recognized high potential areas in contributing to the SDGs. Again, at the last Partnership Assembly, it was recognized that the pastoralism system, especially the silvopastoralism, so in other words, trees, this ecosystem or agriculture production system that include components of trees, pastures, livestock, and perhaps even some of the crop productions in that whole system needs to be looked at as a whole, and including the people involved in it. And we, of course, have to mention that the global agenda also needs to, let's say, mobilize or encourage investment. Very importantly, investment, continued investment, let's say not only in the livestock sector in general, but I would emphasize particularly in supporting the development and dissemination of public goods, okay, research, for instance, assessment, okay, capacity development, okay, through investment. Investment not only by, let's say, international financial institutions, donors, but also national governments, industries also, okay, into these areas.
The UN actually sees a whole lot of different fashions, and partnerships could be one of them. But if partnerships are there to stay as a new modus operandi for the UN, where's it going to go in terms of partnerships in the future?
First of all, the world is changing. Okay, the challenges are there. We have to tackle it all together. The continued increase of population, the demand for adequate food, the need for eradicate hunger, okay, and let us be the last, or let's say the first generation of eradicating poverty and hunger, and the last generation to allow the impact of climate change to continue. So those calls are recognized. Okay. Secondly, is I think it's universally recognized, hopefully, that the way the world was kind of producing and consuming cannot continue, not sustainable, meaning relying heavily on fossil fuel-based energy, okay, relying on food production with heavy inputs of chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, and so on, cannot continue. Producing food at the expense of environment and natural resources, this people recognize. Okay, malnutrition, these cannot continue. Right? So that's one. And tackling these challenges is unprecedented challenges, really. Cannot rely on the power of one country or a handful of countries or governments. It needs the universal efforts, and that is recognized. It's everyone's task, let's say. For instance, FAO has been advocating that let's stop waste and loss of food, okay? 1/3 of the food produced worldwide is wasted or lost, even before they reach, let's say, the table of people, right? We cannot let that happen. But then we look at it further, okay, is it only the supermarket that waste and lose food? No, it's everyone's. It needs to educate people. It needs change of behavior of everyone, okay? So that means engaging a wide range of people, let's say everyone, requires partnership. So in my view, it is not a fashion that tackling these challenges need partnership. Partnership is going to go strong. It's the future.